Hey everyone, welcome to Riff on This, candid conversations behind the music in Florida. And if you know anything about Florida or music, you know that this is a big old state and we have a ton of talent. But I'm here to tell you all of the amazing, juicy details and stories behind all of the music flowing through all the genres in the Sunshine State. I'm your host, Samara Kokinas, taking a break from the weather to catch a musical vibe with you.
Shake just like a willow tree. Baby, when you walk, you shake just like a willow tree. Ooh, baby, you sure look so good to me. Now let me love you, baby. You're driving my heart crazy.
And with me on set today, thank you so much, Dyer Davis, for joining me.
For sure.
I'm so excited to have you here.
I'm excited to be here.
One of my, I don't know if you know, this little tidbit, I did a lot of Google research about you, and of course I had people send me bios, but
Sure.
I'm a huge blues fan.
Awesome.
So I think we are going to have a fantastic conversation.
Cool.
But for those that don't know who you are, because you are an up-and-coming, kind of just a newer blues artist, tell everybody where you're from and how you got to Florida.
So I am born and raised in Daytona Beach. And I started off here, I started playing when I was 4. I guess that when I was a little kid, like 2 and 3, I used to go through, the typical your kid's going to be a musician thing where I went through like the cabinets and grabbed the pots and pans and I'd set them up on the floor and, be playing drums on them and stuff.
Awesome.
And so I had seen the movie That Thing You Do when I was a little kid and I was like, oh dude, I got to be the drummer because he's the highlight of the whole movie. He holds the whole thing together. And then I started taking drum lessons against my will, ended up loving it anyway.
Against your will. Wait a minute. Who forced you to take drum lessons?
Well, I mean, I was a little kid, so it was like my parents had taken me because they're like, oh yeah, you need to start actually figuring out how to work yourself.
You can't hit on the pots and pans the rest of your life.
You can't do that. So it's like, okay, well, you obviously have some sort of affinity for this, and so my 4-year-old self getting taken into the music store, if you can imagine, I was like, what am I even doing here? I don't even want to be here. And so my parents had signed me up for music lessons. I started taking drum lessons. And I had seen a video of the Eagles during their Farewell 4 tour in Sydney, Australia.
Mm-hmm. Classic.
Yes, absolutely. It's great. And I saw Joe Walsh with this, playing Life's Been Good with this hard hat on with a camera in it and with these ridiculous like Grateful Dead pajama pants. They're all like polka dotted with the dancing bears around the head.
Yeah.
And all that. I'm like, that is just the coolest dude I've ever seen, because I was just like, that is so awesome to me that this guy is like, he just really doesn't care about anything. And he had this certain fluidity about the way that he played too, that was very appealing to me. So very shortly thereafter, started taking up guitar too, and then was primarily focusing on guitar, but kept doing both, as I was moving through my lessons phase. And then I was like 12 years old, and my teacher was like, look, man, I just don't really have anything that I can show you anymore.
Wow.
And I'm like, okay. But I didn't want to stop going because I knew the guy for, since I was 4. So I'm like, yeah, dude, I'll just keep coming in here and we'll jam. And
that's like second family. There's always something to learn every day. I mean, even if he can't teach you anything, you're going to learn things by the way they sound.
Absolutely.
Even if it's beyond what he's doing.
Well, and that was something too. I'm very tight with him even now. He's one of my best friends. Daniel Yancey is. And I grew up in Yancey Music Center, which was a store that his family had owned since 94, 95, something like that. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, it's gone now. But and that was something that him and I have talked about quite a bit. He's like, you know what, man? He's like, you talk a lot about all the stuff that you learned from me. He's like, I learned at least an equal amount of stuff from you. Mm-hmm. He's like, it was really cool seeing you know, a kid who's like 5 years old coming in here, you know, singing Beatles tunes like his life depended on it. I'm like, oh, that's really cool, you know, because you don't notice that, and you know, you're just doing your thing. And so that was like really meant a lot, you know.
That's awesome. And I know that you have a really cool story about your first instrument.
Yeah.
Beyond the drums. I mean,
beyond the drums, yeah. I went through a couple because I got like a little first act drum kit when I was for like my third or fourth or Christmas actually. And like there was something where my brother got curious and stuck a knife through the snare head.
Oh wow.
And so then
he got like, curious, or he was like, I've heard enough.
We haven't really discussed that. You know, I don't know. It could probably be a little bit of both. Yeah, so I ended up getting, I wanted a guitar really, really bad. And so I can't even remember how old I was, but it was another Christmas, and my parents had gotten me this little short first act guitar with a built-in amplifier. And I saw the package when I went downstairs, and it, you know, it was kind of triangular, and I was like, oh, I know exactly what that, I want to open that one first.
Let me open that.
You know, I mean,
you're like, no, save it for the last, open your socks first.
Exactly. Your socks and your PJs. I was like, no, man, I gotta open up the guitar first. But yeah, so that was the first one that I got, and it was impossible to play. Which was perfect because it builds character. You know, the fret ends had just cut your hands open, and it had mile-high action, and it was like trying to play a truck.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. So you built up some really thick calluses on the tips of your fingers.
Pretty early, yeah.
It becomes part of your genetic makeup after a little bit of time, I think.
Oh yeah, really absolutely. There's no way to. I could probably go the next 25 years and not play guitar, and I'd still have calluses.
Absolutely.
You know, I'm sure it's been long enough at this point. I mean, I'm no medical scientist, but
So you mentioned going from, you were, 12 years old, and then, of course, here comes, middle school.
Yep.
Did you join a band or anything, or what kind of happened during that period of time that, for you to continue where you were going with music?
Well, a lot of what I was doing at that point was right about the time, because the first time we would do concerts and stuff like that, the music store would. So I was like, did my first one of those when I was 6, I think. And so technically I've been playing live since I was 6. But I really started getting into the music scene and playing with blues bands and stuff exclusively around that time. So I would go, there were a couple different bars that they would do these open jams at. And once I had sort of built my rapport with these bands and they realized that I had some idea as to what I was doing, they decided, it got to a point where I was just playing with them all the time. So we would go, they would do an open jam on Sunday, and I would get a call, or my family would get a call, hey, can we have them for 4 hours today to come out and play with us? And then I would go out and jam with the house band and back up whoever was coming up, which was way cool.
Yeah, I'm sure, especially like, who can say in middle school, I just performed at a concert. I was jamming out with this actual group. That,
yeah, and that's literally the best way to learn how to play live too, especially because obviously all these cats are a lot older than me. Mm-hmm. So it was like they've been around. They kind of know what time it is in multiple different areas, and so it was a really good sort of humbling thing to learn or to learn from rather. And it puts you through your paces, because your job as part of that backing band is to, no matter what they are actually like as a player, as a musician, you want to make the person who is being called up look as great as possible.
Right.
And that can be a challenge, as a musician, forces you to have to, think fast and sort of push things in different directions to, it was really, really like formative thing to do. And then on the side, I was trying to throw together a rock band with some friends of mine. We sucked, but we tried to do it. We would get together and either my garage or my buddy's garage, and we would just suck for however many hours we'd sit there.
You can't
and play.
start out and be amazing, you know?
Well, that's exactly it. And it's funny to think about now because it's just like but we had so much fun doing it. And at the time we didn't think we sucked. So
No, of course not. When you hear yourself, you're like, "This is great." You can't. I mean, you can't sit there and listen to yourself and play. You're just jamming, and you're like, "This is great."
Yeah. We're just like,
We're loud.
We're actually all playing at the same time.
Good job, guys.
Yeah, it doesn't matter if we're in tune, in time, or anything like that. Although we were all very conscious as to try and make sure that we, we're somewhat tight. But yeah,
Teamwork makes the dream work.
Absolutely. It's definitely
It just doesn't necessarily sound great.
Definitely a group effort at that point,
You guys gave 100%, and
Yes.
then you built on that.
Yeah,
So.
absolutely.
So did you ever find during your, you're a young teenager, did you ever find it sometimes maybe difficult to balance your life outside of school and with school? And was there ever a moment of kind of like where you felt overwhelmed with everything?
No, not at all. Because at that point, that wasn't quite at the point where things were really, where I was starting to really pick up any kind of steam. So at that point, it was I knew that I didn't care much about school. Like I have a desire to learn things. I love to read. I would like to think, as much as I generally don't say this to people, in fact, I say the opposite, but I'd like to think in general I'm a pretty smart guy, at least for a high school dropout. And, it wasn't all that bad. There was a little bit of battle with my parents because music was obviously a lot more important to me than, figuring out my multiplication tables and stuff like that, So there was a little bit of a battle there, I would say.
So, coming from a parent's perspective and somebody who was told you're going to get higher education type thing, where you're going to be working cutting fern.
Yeah.
That was my upbringing, and being a parent myself. I can imagine it probably was something that you guys, because of course your parents want what's best for you.
Sure. And I think that there's they knew in the back of their heads. I mean, they weren't ignorant to the situation, but they knew what was up, but at the same time, they also were trying to instill a certain level of importance in, education and all that kind of thing, as they do. I mean, my dad is an attorney and was for 43 years and, went through law school and college and all that kind of. And the funny thing was, I talked to him one time. It's I was probably 17 or something like that. And I was like, what if I wanted to go to college? And he laughed at me. And he's like, you're not built for that. He's like, I'm going to send you off to college so that way I can spend all this money and you're going to flunk out. Or, so that way you can rack up debt and you're still, because he knew he's right. And it was yeah, you're actually totally correct on that.
I mean, higher education isn't necessarily for everybody. It truly isn't. And there have been people that have made their way and been very successful without going that route. And then there's others like me that, we end up in a great career, but at the same rate, I got some school debt.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and there's no secret there, it's I appreciated the level of transparency in that because I was like, okay, that's really cool that, you were on the same page, because I knew that I didn't want to do it anyway.
Right.
I was just sort of curious to pick his brain about it. And he's like, oh yeah, no.
So there's a little bit of a bumpy road here. And I get that completely. There's a little bit of a bumpy road that you've gone down, and I know that you've had some of your own personal battles as well.
Yeah, I have. I didn't, the first question when I would talk to people about this casually is because I started drinking when I was 13. And there was a whole thing that kicked it all off where I was going to, I was sent to a private school after growing up with all the same kids being in public school, and that private school still had the paddle, and I got bullied by my teachers all the time, and I was singled out a lot because I wasn't a academically dedicated person. And so that was sort of, that part about me was sort of taken advantage of, and I was ragged on all the time and, you know, almost paddled and all this kind of, and the workload was just ridiculous.
Yeah.
And it really instilled in me, like, hey, this is what anxiety feels like. Like every time you walk into that building and you smell that smell, like, you know.
That's an intense feeling for somebody of that. I mean, you said 13?
But I was, so when I first went to that school, I would have been 11, I think.
Got you.
But
the drinking came as.
And the drinking came later. So like 11 and 12, I was in that school, and then I got out of that school and just had what I would consider to be nonsensical anxiety, because it was like, I'm not having to deal with that anymore. Mm-hmm. But why do I still feel this
like
way
this.
over really basic, stupid things, I
Right.
thought. And so, yeah, come the time I was 13, I'm like, you know, I started, you know, definitely indulging for sure. And I ended up getting arrested when I was 14 for, you know, possession of drugs and stuff on school campus. And then I had to go, I had to start doing this outpatient rehab program for the court system. And, you know, because they're like, we want to know that you're trying to make some kind of stride. And because they thought that I was just, you know, smoking weed. And come to find out that they had found out about this whole underlying alcohol problem, and that I also was partaking a lot in pills, and that I had an affinity for uppers, and, you know, I was using meth and all kinds of different stuff at different times. So, yeah.
So that moment, that was a very definitive moment for you, because it changed your life.
It did.
It saved your life.
It did. It did. Well, that was kind of the thing, and it put things into perspective where it's like, you know, you come to the realization that people aren't going to stop doing something until they're ready.
Absolutely. You can't help anybody. You can't help someone who does not want to help themselves. When they are ready, that's when it's going to happen. So you have to be in that right mindset.
And so I had gone through all these rehab programs and stuff, and like outpatient situations. I was never in any kind of inpatient because of school or having to go on the road or whatever when I was in high school. But yeah, and I didn't find myself really figuring out how to keep everything between the lines until pretty recently, like 4 or 5 years ago, probably. And
well, we're glad you did.
Yeah, me too.
You've knowing, I mean, I didn't know the depths of what that was going to go to when I asked you that question, but because I know we kind of talked about it a little bit, but when you look at all of those hurdles that you had and where you're at right now, I mean, you're succeeding, you're doing amazing things, so I commend you for that.
Well, and that was the first thing that I was trying to allude to as well, and I have something to say to what you just said too, but the first thing that I was, you know, a lot of people would ask, oh, well, you must have had like a really bad home situation or whatever. It's like, actually, no, my home situation growing up was fantastic. I love my parents. They're still married. They were married when I was a kid. They still live in the house I grew up in. Wow. Everything was really smooth sailing. My issues were because of my desire to take part. It wasn't because it was because of personal stuff with schools and stuff like that, you know, that really kicked it all off. But my home life, I kind of dug my hole and had to sit in it, you know. It was self-inflicted for sure. And so, you know, my parents let me in when they most certainly shouldn't have, I think. And, you know, I stole money from them to buy dope and all kinds of stuff on multiple different occasions. So I kind of don't deserve what I got, but
they love you and it's a blessing.
Yeah.
And, you know, everything, you know, looking at you now sitting here and knowing what we're about to talk about, which are some really crazy stories and some amazing highlights in your career, all of this I think that the listeners and the viewers deserve to hear, just so that they understand who you are as an artist, and that, you know, being in music is not easy. I've said that so many times on this show. Being in music is not easy. Being in entertainment is not easy. But sometimes, because of the way social media is, it looks instantaneous. Yeah. And
you're still fronting. Yeah. And that's the thing, is that people don't realize, like, even there have been conversations about this recently where there's been people who have been, well, you know, this guy hasn't earned his stripes. He just kind of showed up. And it's like, no, that's just not the case. I showed up for you. But I've been doing this for almost 11 years. You know, I signed with my first record label in New York when I was 14. I worked in Brooklyn for 2 years, signed with a label called A25 Records. And I ended up leaving there and working with a marketing and music licensing company out of Philly and taking that record to them. And then they put me on the road for like 2 years. And then I made another record somewhere in the midst of that when I had gotten back to Florida. And then the response from those companies and labels every time was, all right, man, well, you know, you're home, so put a band together and start gigging, you know? It was like best that, yeah. And they had provided bands for me when I had been on the road or when I was in New York. And so I'm sitting there and I'm like, what are you doing to me? Like, what about my guys? Like, did I just do that in vain? Like, this doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
And so then started doing the whole, you know, bar thing and doing solo gigs. And you know, in the meantime, I'd gotten to do a lot of really, really cool stuff. But still, it just, at the end of the day, felt like there wasn't a lot to show for what I had done up to that point. And I had thrown together Rubber Soul Child just before Dog Bites Back had happened, and it's been a long road.
Yeah. I mean, you didn't start in blues.
No, I didn't.
Where'd you
I
start?
started in
I was
rock.
like K-pop. It was K-pop.
That was
wasn't it?
totally K-pop, yeah. 100%.
I can see you rocking K-pop right now.
Yeah, nothing but straight up auto-tune all the time. But I started in rock, and because to me it was, I grew up on the Stones and the Beatles and Faces and
The
the Jeff
iconic
Beck
legend
group.
of the guy that wore the Grateful Dead PJs.
Yeah, absolutely. James Gang and all the whole 9 yards. And so to me, you know, with the exception of the American cats to a certain degree, it was always that British blues thing. Like even Black Sabbath, before they became like the godfathers of metal, they were a blues band. So to me, that was rock and roll. I didn't know that there was another name for that. I'm like, that is pure untapped rock and roll. We don't care. This is what we're doing, and you're either gonna like it or you're not, and we're gonna look really, really cool while we do it. You know what I mean? And so, and that was, I was enamored with that, and I basically tried to take what my current record, Dog Bites Back, encompasses with my previous stuff, and had tried to pitch that to a rock market. And it wasn't gonna work. And I was like,
Why? What's wrong?
why isn't this working? And and I'm like, the rock fans don't, you know, they want to hear, and nothing against this, but they want to hear stuff like Disturbed and things like that. And to be frank with you, it's just not in my wheelhouse. It's not a sustainable thing for me. And it's not something that I'm totally into. And it was just like, you're sitting there putting out the stuff that you think is really cool, and I still think is really cool. It's I can look back on everything that I've done and properly be proud of it. But at the same, especially considering how old I was when I did it, but at the same time, it was also like, why isn't this working? I don't get this at all. So, yeah.
You took a little avenue through country.
Yeah, I work with.
Did you have a banjo?
No,
Please tell me.
no. There was a not associated.
Epic. I'm sure you could play it.
Not associated with country at all. I tried to learn how to play banjo a bunch of years ago, and I was just like, dude, this is not happening. But
It's a lot of picking.
it is a lot of picking. At some point, I definitely want to do that, because the guys that are really great banjo players are ridiculous guitar players. So because they translate a lot of that stuff over. So
Yeah.
I'm going to definitely have to, you know, cross that bridge when it comes. But yeah, I started working with an artist named Ashley Estevez a couple years ago. And she's a really cool country artist, and I might be a little bit biased because I was a co-writer on most everything that they've done, but yeah, so I co-write with them and had been co-writing with them for the last couple years, and was tracking on her records and whatnot. But yeah, that was I'm really primarily a rock and blues, you know, British inspired guy, you know, and that's where I kind of, anything that comes aside from that, like even with the country thing, when I was asked to do that, I was like, well, I've never done this. I'm sure I could. Let's see. You know?
Why not try it?
Yeah, and it's great stuff.
You
in
have a
that
cowboy
catalog,
hat?
too. I have a couple, yeah. Yeah.
So how did you get into, because I know we're coming up to, time-wise here, how did you get associated with Wildwood Records and Stephen Dees and Victor Wainwright and Billy Chapin? Because that's how we connected.
Yeah. So Billy Chapin had come before anything else. When I got off the road from working in Philly and all that, I had come home, and again, it was like, best of luck to you kind of thing. It felt like, anyway, whether that's, what they were actually trying to say. But, and Billy's like, you know what? I think that we can, I think that I would like to try and make something of this. And so he decided to start working with me, and I did my second record with him in rock, and it was really cool record. We were really happy with how everything had come out, and then we just spent a bunch of years while I was doing solo gigs and throwing together bands and playing, crappy bar gigs and stuff like that, trying to figure out how to make this thing break. And eventually, after a few years of this, maybe 5-6 years of this, 4 or 6 years, Billy had called me up. He goes, hey, look, I have this guy, and he's a very well-dressed producer, and he seems enthusiastic about you. We should bring him on. These are all the people that he's worked with and whatnot, and his name is Tony Battaglia. So I'm like, okay, great, let's bring him on and see what happens. And so the conversation had come up of, do we want to do just a solo thing where it's you and then you have a backing band, or do we want to do a proper band and give it a band name? And it was like, well, I've been trying to do the solo thing for long enough. Let's throw the band thing at the wall and see what happens. So we started Rubber Soul Child, which was an uphill battle simultaneously in 1,000-degree heat, also in the snow, waist deep.
Gotcha.
While you're getting shot at.
Wow. It was a battlefield.
It was really, it was impossible to just keep a group together. The dynamics amongst the whole thing was really challenging. And this whole thing really started to pick up steam and start doing well right about the time that COVID had graced us with its presence.
Yeah, don't we just love it?
Yeah. So
I can imagine the beard mask you had going on during that time.
Oh, I didn't have a beard at that point. That was the thing. It was very close. I was still bald, but I was very close cut. And
I can't imagine.
And once Rubber Soul Child, because I was specifically asked when I was in Rubber Soul Child to keep it trim close.
Okay,
to
gotcha.
to be in the sort of Greta Van Fleet ilk. You want to be a younger looking dude. And so as soon as Rubber Soul Child finally had decided to hang it up, I was like, dude, I'm not cutting this thing. Like, I'm done. I'm done.
I'm gonna be me.
My hairline is so terrible that I don't even have the audacity to try and grow my hair. So it's like, if I can grow a good beard, dude, I'm gonna do it. Anything I can to sort of like mask this dumpster fire on the front of my head.
It's not a dumpster fire. But I think the look suits you very well, especially with your attire.
Well, I appreciate that. It's definitely
outfits.
A unique thing. It's become a unique thing for sure.
You have to stand out.
Yeah.
You have to stand out.
I gotta, grow hair where it counts, I guess.
So Dog Bites Back.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about that.
So we had started, after RSC and all that kind of thing, I was really sort of depressed because I'm like, again, I had still been trying to do the blues rock thing and pitch it to a rock market, and I'm looking at rock charts and everything is Disturbed and Five Finger Death Punch and things and that sort of thing, which is cool, but again, not sustainable to me.
Right.
And so finally, Chapin had called me up and he goes, look, man, I know that you're upset, but he said, look, I have this buddy of mine, Stephen Dees. He's like, he has a record label called Wild Roots. They're putting out a Volume 2 record. He's like, I happened to send him a cover that I had done of Oh Darling by the Beatles when I was like 15 or 16. And he's like, he really likes it. He wants you to sing on this song for this record called The Bad Seed. He's like, you know, if you do well, something might come of it. And I said, okay, great. So I go into the studio and for this session, and I sang the song, and I guess that Steven was impressed enough that he was like, well, man, let's make a record, you know? And I was like,
Is that how he sounds?
it's pretty good, yeah. And I was like, cool, dude, let's make it happen. And of course, through that, you know, I very quickly got acclimated to Victor Wainwright, who oddly enough was somebody that I had heard about my entire time growing up.
Yeah.
So I knew who he was. He was like this, you know, unspoken legend that I'm just like, oh my God, it's Victor, you know,
Right.
which was really cool. And then it turned out that him and I also happened to get along super well. I consider him a very good friend of mine. But
That's awesome.
yeah, and as soon as we started work on the record, it was just match made in heaven.
Awesome.
Creative process was smooth.
Moses was a holy man, led his people to the promised land. 40 years of desert sand, pain and misery. Moses never
So real quickly, tell me about, you know, just, I know touring has always, you know, brought up its stories, and I always try to dive into a touring story or
Yeah.
two, because the musicians are the best people to hear the most wild stories I've ever heard in my life.
Yeah.
So share.
Okay.
Give me the tea. I need the tea.
tea.
Not necessarily the tea, maybe some coffee. But
Well, I'll give you the quick one is this. I would consider this to be my worst gig I've ever had. I was playing in a bar one time, and I had been going through alcohol withdrawals and meth withdrawals simultaneously. And I had to go to the guy at the door and ask him for a 5-gallon paint bucket so that way I could stick it behind my amp. And I had to play the whole 4 hours singing and everything, and I had to use the bucket a couple times.
oh man.
Yeah, people like left, and it was, it was. I did my job and I got paid. But
like, we didn't come here for this.
I got
Hang on a minute.
yeah. So it was, you know,
Oh,
it was
man.
that. So that's one of them. That was the worst of the worst. There was one. I had been on the road, and I was touring with two bands at the time. One was called Rivers Monroe. The other was called the Howling Tongues. There was a Wrangler jeans commercial where there was a cover of a CCR song that you've probably seen. That was the Howling Tongues. So we were on the road together, and there was this guy in Rivers Monroe. They were a pop punk band, so it wasn't my thing at all, and I was kind of like not even shy to let them know that I didn't like it. And so so we were playing at a college. We were at the University of Central Missouri. And
Wait, I thought you were about to say Florida, and Missouri.
yeah.
That just sets the stage right there.
Yeah,
Go
yeah.
ahead.
So we're at the University of Central Missouri, and we're playing the show. I was the first one on the bill, and then it was Rivers, and then it was the Howling Tongues, if I remember correctly. And I was very tight with the Howling Tongues, and we both kind of like didn't really like Rivers Monroe very much,
Gotcha.
just because we weren't into the tracks. And so there
Nothing
was
against the people.
nothing against the people, but there ended up being something between me and one of the guys in that band. We both had our eyes on the same girl that night, and so
Here we go.
Yeah.
Let's start.
So this is how it gets good. So I was like, all right, well, I want. I was talking to the sound guys during sound check. I said, hey, can I get up on top of the subs during one of my guitar solos or something like that? And yeah, dude, it's all good. You know, just make sure you've got like 4 feet that you're going to hop down. So make sure that, you know, you're not wrapped up in your cable or anything like that. Okay, great. So the time comes, I play the set. I'm not able to get up on the subs because I just don't have time. Well, one of the dudes in Rivers Monroe had overheard me say all that. And so they go to play their set. And then I see two of the guys in Rivers Monroe get up on top of the subs. And I turn to...
They're both guitarists, or?
One plays bass and the other one plays a keytar.
Oh, not a keytar.
It's a keytar. So
they're great.
I'm like,
But you're like, wait a minute.
I'm not letting a dude playing a keytar steal my chick. So I'm like, all right. So I'm all upset and I go over to Taylor. I was probably like 16 or 17 when this happened. And I go over to Taylor, who's a singer for the Howling Tongues, and I'm like, come on, man. I'm like, I was supposed to be the one getting up on the subs. I'm like, these dudes are getting up on the subs. They got no business stealing my thing. And he's like, oh, really? And I'm like, yeah. And I'm like, I'm not going to name the guy, but I'm like, he's the one that's trying to steal my chick. And so he's like,
that you claimed in the audience. And she's like, no.
Yeah. And she has no idea what's going on. And that was the whole thing. So, and I had smashed a guitar that night, need I say. This is just a side note. I smashed a guitar that night and I cut my lip open really bad. So at this point, my whole shirt's covered in blood. I just got yelled at by my manager for not wearing a shirt running to the infirmary through the crowd because he's like, you're going to scare people because you're bleeding.
Yeah.
And so now I'm just back there. I'm miserable. I have glue on my mouth, and I'm wearing this blood-stained shirt.
And there's a guitarist trying to
take my girl. So I go to Taylor and I'm like, hey man, just to paint the picture. So I'm like, hey man, this guy's doing this. And he's like, oh, that's not gonna happen. So he goes to the drummer and he's like, yo, dude, give me a drumstick. So he throws him a drumstick and he runs up the side of the stage while they're standing up on the thing and, prodded him with the drumstick. Politely. And he almost fell off of the sub, which would have been like a 10-foot drop
that would have been
on
horrible.
The front. Well, yeah, it would have been.
You're like, yeah, but at the time.
At the time, yeah. So that happened, and because I was, covered in blood and she had no idea what was going on, neither one of us ended up getting the girl, so.
Man. Wait a minute. You went through all of that.
All of that. He almost died.
The guitarist didn't get the girl. The guitarist didn't get the girl. I am done.
Yeah.
I am done. Young love.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's been a very, I've gotten to do a lot of really cool things.
Yeah.
This whole thing got kicked off by my parents wanting an opportunity for me. And so when I was like 14, they sent me to a rock and roll fantasy camp because they're like, maybe somebody's going to see you.
Yeah.
And I got to play with Peter Criss from Kiss, and I got to make friends with a lot of people that I'm still friends with now. Like Rodney O'Quinn, who's the bass player for Foghat, Sandy Gennaro, and Rami Jaffe from the Foo Fighters and all this kind of stuff. And I got to meet Johnny Winter, and it was just a really, really cool thing. And that set the stage for everything that was to come. That's awesome. It's been a really, really cool road. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. And so just to wrap it up real quick, what are you doing right now that you're working on, touring? You're working on some songs?
Yeah, I'm working on a couple of singles for a couple different occasions right now. We are hitting the road in September, which I guess is coming up real soon.
Yes, it is.
I am nominated for debut artist release for the Blues Blast Awards. So we got invited to play for the awards ceremony. So we have to go to Chicago for that.
That's awesome.
We're just trying to make sure that the tour is all good and that we're good to go. I'm very short-sighted right now with regards to that because I'm booked a lot, and it's just like, all right, let's go do this.
Yeah, and you know what? Live in the moment for sure.
Absolutely.
Enjoy it. Take time to enjoy it.
I spent a little bit too much time, especially during COVID, not living in the moment, and you're resenting the fact that there's nothing to do in the moment. So why would you think about it,
Right.
So not to sit here and continue to blame something that's however many years old now, but it's
it
nice.
changed your perspective.
It did, and it's nice to slip back into the whole living in the moment thing. So.
And just so any of the lady viewers out there see you and in on tours and that, just to let you ladies know, he's not going to approach you and with a bloody lip or anything like that in the future. We don't do those things anymore. He's a class act now.
I've grown up a lot. I've outgrown that. Yeah, I don't bleed for anyone anymore.
I love it. So where can people follow you on your social media?
If you go on to Instagram at Dyer Davis Official, it's DYERDAVIS Official. You go follow me on there. You go follow me on Facebook, facebook.com/Dyer Davis Official. No underscores or anything on either of those. And if you want to see what our schedule is looking like, you go to dyerdavismusic.com and everything is up there.
So I know you just shot a music video, Angels Got the Blues?
Angels Get the Blues.
Get the Blues. See, I knew I was going to mess it. It was literally a second that I was thinking about it and already forgot.
Yeah, we shot that. We shot that a little while ago. It was a blast. I am extraordinarily excited for this. I'm very much looking forward to putting this out. It's going to be out sometime mid-September. I'll be announcing on my social medias and all that as to when it's actually going to be released. But definitely want people to stay tuned for that.
What's the flavor?
It's beautiful.
It's beautiful.
It's beautiful. We shot it in a church, and it
like cathedral type vibe?
Yeah,
Nice.
like old school kind of Catholic thing with the organ pipes going up the walls and the stained glass and the whole 9 yards.
Oh, I'm so here for that.
It came out really beautifully, and the song, I'm very excited to see visually how much harder it makes the song hit.
Well, I like all blues, but my favorite type of blues is slow. I love the jazziness of it. Just I can sit there and listen to people like Arthur King. Just sit there. He doesn't even have to sing.
Oh yeah.
Doesn't even have to sing. People like you don't have to sing, but
that
when you sing, it adds so much.
And that's the thing with this song is that it's the one thing on the record that has nothing on it. It's me singing, a piano, and a guitar, and the guitar doesn't even come in until like the last minute. It is really.
Ooh, I just got chills.
I'm
excited.
It's a really, and I know that it's got my name on it, so it might seem like I'm biased, but it's a really beautiful song. Every single time I play that song live, it makes me cry. Every single time.
Like not just because it's dusty in the building, but because it has just that much emotion for you.
Yes.
Oh wow.
Absolutely.
A grown man cry. I love that. I love that. No, but it's important that you feel into your music, that you love your music, and you're not being biased.
Yeah.
I think that you should feel that way about your music. So, especially moving forward with the other stuff that you create, you have an emotional attachment to your songs.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
absolutely.
I'm excited to hear it.
It's a very emotional attachment to that one. So that's why I'm saying I hope that video really helps people understand, at least to a certain degree, how it makes me feel to sing it. So
you're going to send me that early ahead of time before it drops, right?
Sure.
You're going to give me a little preview, a little sneak listen? Okay,
yes.
cool.
I will be sure to do that.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure.
Nice.
I have to go through the whole editing process and wrap that up. And once that time comes, I will definitely send you.
And I will wear waterproof mascara that day. Just let me know ahead of time.
Well, I hope that it hits you like that. I really do. It's
going to give us all the feels. That's
awesome.
And I have to say, The Dog Bites Back is a fantastic album.
Thank you so much.
You guys did top-notch work, which I expect coming from the group of people that you're working with. And, but your voice is amazing. And, if anybody has the time to really check you out, listen to this young man's voice. He's got so much soul. And I know it's hard to believe because he's 24. But I'm telling you right now, you really surprised me, and it was a wonderful surprise to
Well,
me.
that's very kind of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for coming on the show. I really appreciate you taking time
Absolutely.
out of your busy schedule.
Absolutely. Hey, likewise.
And go get some more touring stories so I can bring it back on, okay?
Oh, we didn't even graze anything. Those were
know.
just the ones that popped into my head first.
Who knows? There might be a part 2 coming up soon.
I'll call you.
That's going to do it for this episode of Riff on This. Be sure to stay locked in tight. I'll have another episode coming to you soon. Thanks for listening to Riff on This, and a huge thank you to our rockin' guest, Dyer Davis, for stopping by and spending time with us. Be sure to follow him on social media by searching Dyer Davis Official, or check out his website at dyerdavismusic.com. And don't forget, you can link me on my social media. Just search Samara Kokinas News 6 on Facebook. On Instagram, search Samara Kokinas. And before we go, a huge thank you to our behind-the-scenes production team, Derek Mosier, Ryan Haley, Chris Flora, Philip Deems, and Joe Grennan. Please take some time to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts and on Spotify. And don't forget, sharing is caring, so tell a friend about us too. You can find videos of all the podcast episodes on clickorlando.com/riffonthis. Until next time, friends.
I'm not worthy. You're an angel and I'm a fool. I care too much to let you suffer.